Hello and welcome back to Hoosier Game Day, brought to you by the Hoosier Network. As always, Ryan Canfield and Liv Clements, and big news just dropped yesterday, the CFP bracket. And before we even get into that, what a season IU has had. 11-1. I know both of us did not predict that at the beginning of the season.
Yeah. With all the hype, with all the promises that Curt Cignetti brought to this program the first week of December last year at the Maryland basketball game, none of us could have expected this. While we knew that this team was going to have a revamped culture and a new attitude, 11-1 and a college football playoff berth was certainly not in the cards. And while we could sit here and say that, they could beat Nebraska, Washington, Michigan, Ohio State, but they just had to do it, this in itself is an accomplishment like no other. We've never seen anything like this. 11 wins, a bucket victory, something that has not happened in 6 years, I believe, since 2019. And now you get to play for a national championship. And this is, I cannot express how, proud I am to, be a witness of Curt Cignetti's first season in Bloomington.
I mean, I 100% agree. And big key factors for IU being 11-1 is that offense and that defense. But I want to hit on Justice Ellison specifically and Omar Cooper Jr. Big factors, and Elijah Surratt as well. And did you think those key players were going to be who IU was looking at when they were on the field?
Well, you get a mix of three different types of recruiting. You get, a Tom Allen recruit in Omar Cooper, Indianapolis native.
Yes.
And then you get Elijah Surratt, who follows Sig from JMU. And then you have Justice Ellison, a transfer that was not really in the Cignetti system, but comes over after, his career at Wake Forest had been, it hit its, what do I want to say? It hit its apex after Sam Hartman left. And, you just get a sense of what else is there left for Justice Ellison to do. You go to a hungry team. And that's what they did. And, we talked about this at the beginning of the season. You need to have playmakers in a Big Ten that is expanding with more offense, and these three guys have been amazing. I mean, Justice Ellison, I can't sit here and say that I know the all Big Ten selections off the top of my head, but he should have at least gotten an honorable mention.
Yeah.
Elijah Surratt, I think, was second team, and Omar Cooper, I mean, you don't need to give any award to tell how good he was this season. I said it early in the season, UCLA game, I watched that episode back a couple of times, and, someone who has not benefited from the Walt Bell system of the past couple of years, the triple option type deal.
Right.
This new offense, the Shanahan offense with Shanahan, Cignetti, Tino Sinceri, it benefited for nobody more than Omar Cooper, even in his second season. Yeah. Elijah Surratt had a track record of being a great receiver, but Omar Cooper, it kind of, worked out one way for Donovan McCulley. It worked out a different way for Omar Cooper Jr. Donovan McCulley left. He didn't want to, he didn't trust the process. And while we said that he made a decision that was exclusive to him and that will work out in his favor, Omar Cooper is certainly, making himself, some money when it comes to next year's NFL draft.
And we talk about even awards specifically with Curtis Rourke, a season he has had, which has just been insane with leading this offense, and even just being in the talk about being a Heisman candidate. How did that even come to be, and do you feel like it is deserved?
Well, I mean, I don't think he's going to be a finalist, as those will be announced in the next 3 hours on Monday Night Countdown. But when I asked Coach Sig at Media Day about why they went and got Curtis Rourke, I mean, I can't remember what he exactly said, but I will tell you, as someone who knows the game, someone that's watched the MAC, somebody that has does not know and knows a lot about college football. Curtis Rourke is a leader, and he showed it at Ohio, winning MAC Player of the Year, winning bowl games, appearing in big-time games, even in the MAC. And we were not surprised in the slightest that he was going to have this role, not even the role, just the impact on this team as a leader. So he earned it himself. And while we did expect him to be like this, he definitely earned it with his play, especially early on.
And not his best game was that Ohio State game, and that was the one loss for IU.
Yeah.
For you, just quickly, what changed for IU in that game?
Well, I mean, we haven't been here to recap that game, so it's been a while. But something that took away early from this game was, two plays, really, for Indiana. And it became, the second what led to the second Ohio State touchdown was the botched punt.
Yep.
And then I think it was IU's first punt of the second half was the Caleb Downs punt return touchdown. First, you gotta grab the punt. I don't care how slippery the ball is. I don't care how loud the stadium is. You gotta do the little things right, especially on special teams, if you want to compete for national championships. And while they could afford that loss because they only have one.
Yep.
They're gonna learn from it. But if you're James Evans, you gotta catch the punt. You gotta catch it. And second, the long snapper who snapped that punt snapped the second punt that we're going to talk about and didn't wrap up Caleb Downs when he was in, their own territory around the 35-yard line. And that was really costly for Indiana. And they also just ran out of gas. Ohio State is a second-half team. And, they were a second-half team. But, Indiana did not have any answers for their offense in the second half.
Yeah. It's interesting being 11-1, but yes, still IU is in the college football playoffs, so do not sleep on them. And we are going to go ahead and break it down, that bracket that just got announced yesterday, with me and Will coming up next. Welcome back to Hoosier Game Day, and as always, we're with Will, and Will, you're no stranger to Hoosier Game Day, so let's just break down the bracket while we're here. IU went and go ahead and got ranked 8th in the CFP, and then got spot at 10th in the bracket. When you first saw it, what did you think?
I thought it was a fair ranking overall. I don't think Indiana should really jump above SMU. SMU was in their conference championship. Granted, they lost it, and it was a literal last-second field goal. But I don't have any problems with where Indiana ended up. I think it's kind of what everybody was expecting. Sure, there's some people that think they should be much higher because they're a one-loss team, and there's a couple two-loss teams above them. You got to think those are automatic bids. That's kind of how the playoff format's designed now. So I don't personally have any problems with where Indiana ended up in the total rankings-wise. I think it's very fair. The problem with not beating any ranked teams, it's an issue. You got to play who's in front of you, right? It's not like they can control that. But when a committee's looking back at it, they're like, well, all these teams end up being bad.
Right.
So what? They're still in the playoff, right? It's at least you have a shot. It could be worse. You could be Bama, who scheduled a lot of tough opponents, but they lost to middle-of-the-table opponents. That's why they're not in. So I think it's a very fair shake where Indiana ended up.
Do you feel like there is a team specifically on this bracket you feel like has an easy path? Easy in quotes,
An easy path, it would be between either Texas or Penn State.
Okay.
I think it's pretty much a toss-up. Texas was the number 2 seed until they lost to Georgia, right? And they proved that they can play a tough Georgia team very close. In practically a Georgia home game. It was in Atlanta. And they're playing the 12 seed. They got Arizona State. Or they're playing Clemson first. It's Clemson first round.
Clemson.
But Clemson's still a feisty team. Dabo's been here before. He can coach these guys up. Quarterback Klubnik's from Texas. This dude knows this environment probably like the back of his hand at this point. And Clemson can still put up a good fight. People had SMU projected higher than they ended up, but Clemson still beat them. Clemson's been in close games with SEC teams that are tough, like South Carolina.
Right.
And South Carolina's a very good team. And I bet South Carolina probably could have beat Texas if they played.
Okay.
They almost had Bama in Bama, which was a ridiculous game to watch. But that's probably one of the easier matchups on the board. And then it's Arizona State.
Okay.
Arizona State's got Scatabo. You stop Scatabo, Arizona State's a little questionable at that point. It's a little shaky. And then it's Hoosiers on the other side at that point, because what is it? That's Natty at that point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Natty at that point. And with Penn State, they've got, who they got in the first round? It's SMU.
SMU and Boise.
SMU and Boise.
Right.
Group of 5 team who played Oregon very close at the beginning of the year.
They did.
Oregon wasn't together. And then that SMU team, shown they can be shaky too. But like I said, Clemson's a tough team. And this is a 12-team playoff. There's no easy path. It's just easier on paper than some other teams have.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anybody's got a really cakewalk path, but if I was to pick an easier path, it's Penn State or Texas.
Anything can happen in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's college football. It's who wants it more on a Saturday. That's all it is.
Makes it fun.
Oh, yeah.
And when IU Notre Dame coming up, big question is, who do you think will be facing Georgia?
I'm going to think Indiana edges it out. I think it's a tough game, but like I said, I think the passing attack for Indiana can just edge that game out, because I think the run games, they're not going to be what the teams are expecting them to be or what they have been in the season. I'm sure they're expecting these run games to be diminished a little bit. It's late in the season. They're going to be coming off, obviously, like a 3-week-long break, but still, these guys are beat down, and these defenses are tough against the run. It comes down to that pass game. I think Rourke and Indiana can beat them out. by a score, maybe 2.
And this is why we have Will on the show, because he's rooting for the Hoosiers, guys. Will.
It's just an analysis. Good Lord.
Well, we appreciate you coming on as always.
Happy to be here.
We are now going to send it over to Ryan with his guests to break some more stuff down.
All right, thank you, Liv and Will Stu. Great job breaking that down. We're going to dive deeper into the matchup, but first, let me introduce my guest, Nick Rodecap, Hoosier Network football beat, and you can hear him on IU Sports Sunday, 98.7 WGCL. Great to have you here, my friend.
Great to be with you. Excited to talk ball.
Let's get down to business. You know, when we had you on earlier, we asked about the significance of this whole thing coming together just as a, being undefeated in October or November. Now it's playoff time. It's playoff time. What do you make of this whole season now that it has fully come to fruition as a playoff season, a historic season, a bucket and spittoon victory season? Just give me your thoughts.
It's a storybook season for Indiana. I mean, you think about where this program was 12 months ago. They were in the basement of college football. There were a whole bunch of unknowns. The roster was being flipped completely on its head. And there was a lot of skepticism, and that skepticism was justified. Indiana fans were thinking, okay, if Cignetti can get Indiana to 6-6, 7-5, win a bowl game, that's a successful season. But Cignetti, he doesn't impose any limitations on himself. He preaches that to his staff and to his players. And they came in and just completely shifted the paradigm of Indiana football. And in putting that in the historical context of what Indiana football has been, I think is really important. You go to the Wikipedia page, and one of the first things, Indiana was the first FBS program to 700 losses. So Curt Cignetti had what people viewed as an impossible task, but he said, I've done this a few times before. Let me show you how it's done. And he gets Indiana into the college football playoff for the first time ever. It's a very historic feat, but he talks about it, and they've talked about it a lot. Nobody on this team is satisfied with where they are right now. The whole, really, whatever they want is out in front of them. All they got to do is go get it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I still even think about, they even won the bucket game. And I get Purdue was 1-11, but at the same time, they tackled this one feat, and that honestly was not even, that was a speck in the success of this season, which I think is just phenomenal. So let's get to this playoff matchup. The 7 seed of Notre Dame, 10 seed of the Hoosiers, going to South Bend. We were talking about it before we came on air. A Cathedral graduate of the Cathedral High School Irish,
Guilty
is that correct?
Scars, yes.
And you've grown up around a lot of Notre Dame people, and, with this rivalry, it's Notre Dame, the football school, Indiana, the basketball school. It's just how it works. It's how it works. Yeah. And, what do they call it? The reverse jacket fans?
Reversible jacket fans.
And I mean, you can't even knock it because
it's
how it works in Indiana. But
it's not how it should work.
You have it down to a science. What do you think about this matchup and the significance of this is a state championship? Will just said it. It's a state championship. Why do you like this matchup? Do you not like this matchup? Why is it significant or why is it not?
Well, selfishly, I think it's great because it means that we as student media members who cover the team don't have to fly to, say, Georgia or Texas or wherever, State College, if we might have ended up there. So as someone who's covering the team, I think it's great. For the fans, I think it's great as well. Obviously, Indiana has a humongous fan base in Chicago and Indianapolis, in the state of Indiana, of course, as a whole. So the travel situation is not bad. The ticket situation, that's different. I don't know what's going on with the ticket prices. I'm not an economist. I'm not going to pretend to know what's going on.
I feel like Indiana fans just were on the back end. I mean, anybody who was playing Notre Dame in South Bend would be on the back end of some horrible ticket prices.
Yeah,
but please continue.
The pageantry in Notre Dame, the tradition, the history, it really is something else. I got to visit their campus when I was in high school, and it's something you just got to experience for yourself.
Right.
I think it's a very, very cool matchup. Indiana and Notre Dame haven't played each other a lot, especially recently.
Yeah.
And they just announced that home and home that I think is 6 or 7 years down the pipeline. So the fact that we get this now, I think, is really cool for the sport of college football, for Indiana football going up against what is considered and what is regarded and what is the preeminent college football program in this state.
Yeah.
So for Indiana to go up to South Bend and to be part of that tradition and part of that history, I think is really cool.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's get to the actual game. So Riley Leonard versus Curtis Rourke. Will talked about it a little bit. But what does Riley Leonard do so well and in a way that Indiana hasn't seen anything like that this season?
Well, I was talking with Will Stewart, who we were just on with, and I kind of described him as Haynes King, the Georgia Tech quarterback, with an arm.
Yeah.
Leonard is extremely mobile. He's got about 2,800 total yards from scrimmage. 721 of those are on the ground. He's Notre Dame's second leading rusher. He's accounted for 30 touchdowns, and almost half of those, 14, have come on the ground. So Leonard provides sort of an interesting look. Indiana hasn't faced a lot of dual threat quarterbacks this season, especially not to the caliber of Riley Leonard. He's thrown 5 interceptions, and that's not a lot. He's pretty smart with the football, and he gets out of the pocket a lot. He's very mobile. He likes to improvise, and they run a lot of design quarterback draws, a lot of tight end passes. Notre Dame's receivers don't get involved in the passing game as much as you might expect. But really what makes him so dangerous isn't just him, it's the running back behind him, Jeremiah Love.
Yeah.
And Jeremiah Love is scary. He's one of the most talented skill players, I think, in the country, especially at running back. Over 7 yards a carry, nearly 1,000 yards of rushing in the regular season, over 1,000 yards from scrimmage when you add in his pass catching yards, 17 total touchdowns. It is worth noting he's coming off an injury that he sustained in the third quarter against USC, but he's expected to play on December 20th when Indiana heads up to South Bend. I think this Notre Dame offense is a really interesting look for Indiana. Again, they haven't faced a lot of dual threat quarterbacks like Riley Leonard. I don't know how they're going to match up because you think about Mikhail Kamara, this Indiana pass rush, getting into the backfield. That's been their specialty. Yeah. Leonard has the elusiveness to escape that. I'm really intrigued by what Indiana cooks up.
Yeah, and the thing with the running backs, with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, is that they're kind of like mirror images of themselves. Like, I think something that Indiana has seen is like the both of these guys are kind of mimic the game of Travion Henderson a little bit, and you get two of them could see them on either down, first, second, or third. And then this offensive line for Notre Dame, it's what Irish teams. I mean, in the trenches and with the tight ends, that's what Notre Dame, that's what they're known for. Yeah. Where does this defensive line really get the best of them?
I think it's going to be, you think about the Michigan State game, Indiana playing Michigan State. Really, it was kind of Mikhail Kamara just taking things over. Yeah. I think you're going to need to see that from Indiana again against Notre Dame. They've got some dudes up front. They got a lot of size. They're very physical. I think, Brian Haynes, the defensive coordinator, maybe cooking up some stunts, getting Kamara free, coming across the line of scrimmage, giving Notre Dame some different looks. But in these kinds of games, it sounds cliche, but you need your big-time players to step up. That's why they're in that situation. And I think it's going to be Mikhail Kamara. You might see C.J. West in there as well. Some that a lot of people describe him as unblockable. And he's an interior D lineman, so he doesn't get a lot of the flowers that somebody like Kamara might get because Kamara stuffs the stat sheet more. But C.J. West is also an impact player for Indiana on defense. And one of those two, if not both, they're going to need to have a big day.
Yeah, and then for Notre Dame, outside on defense, on offense, they have the O-line, the tight end, and the running quarterback. On defense, it's the defensive secondary, Xavier Watts. And they're also without Ben Morrison, who arguably, with Will Johnson, was probably one of the best cornerbacks in the country. He's been out with, I believe, a hip injury for quite a while. Where is this game won and lost for both teams?
Well, I mean, you think about how Indiana sort of kind of fizzled out against Ohio State. It was because the offensive line miscommunicated in the pass protection game. Curtis Rourke had no time to make decisions. Indiana actually ran the ball pretty well in that game, about 100 yards on the ground. The problem was Ohio State's pass rush made Indiana's offense one-dimensional. They had to run the ball. It was the only way that they could move the football. And then you force Indiana into third and medium passing situations. You send 7 guys, Rourke has no time. Yeah. So I think if Notre Dame can get to Curtis Rourke, like we saw Ohio State's pass rush do, then there's a very good chance the Irish take that game. If Rourke has time, I mean, we've seen the kinds of throws that he can make. Oh, yeah. He can air it out. His ball placement has been great. Drops have hurt Indiana late in the season. That's something to keep an eye on. But Indiana can establish the run with Justice Ellison. He runs angry. I love watching him run. Ellison and Lawton on the ground, and then Rourke goes to the air. If he has time to survey the field and make his reads, I think Indiana can come out ahead. But it all comes back to that offensive line. They've got to give him time to survey the field. Notre Dame's got a very dangerous secondary, but I would trust Curtis Rourke going against any secondary in the country as long as he has the time to make those decisions.
I totally agree. All right, before we cut you loose, need a prediction?
Whew. Well,
we do have 10 days to do this.
Yeah.
Not sure when we're going to upload this, but, I'd love to hear your take on the outcome of this game.
Well, we haven't talked about special teams. Notre Dame has a lot of problems on special teams, especially with their field goal kicking unit. Less than 50%. They've used 3 different kickers this season. They've made 8 of their 18 field goals attempted. I mean, it's going to be close. Yeah. I don't think that's a shock to anybody. Yeah. I know there was a CFB 25 simulation that had Indiana losing in overtime.
I saw that, yeah.
We might go to overtime, but I do think it's going to come down to special teams. Nicholas Radicic finally missed a kick against Purdue. It was very strange, but it was a 40-yarder in the snow. I think, oh man, it's tough. I think it's going to come down to a last-second field goal. I think Indiana takes it, say 20-19. And again, Georgia's without Carson Beck.
Yeah.
Playing with house money at that point, but
Let's
you got to
do
get
it.
by Notre Dame first. We're going to see a lot of red, I think, in Notre Dame Stadium. It's going to be very close, probably pretty low scoring.
Yeah.
Special teams, I think, will make the difference.
I was actually thinking about, the turnout for this game. I mean, Indiana, the fans are going to pay their money to come see this game.
Yeah.
I think back to the 2021 matchup Notre Dame had against Cincinnati, and it was all red in the upper left corner of the stadium. My friend, thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Always a
All
pleasure.
of your analysis, all that stuff. We'll be back with Liv and I to wrap up this episode.
Of course, welcome back. It's finally Liv and Ryan, and we are going to give our score predictions for the IU Notre Dame first round of the college football playoffs. Who would have thought that's what we'd be saying? Because I'm shook still that we're even talking about the college football playoffs, because who would have thought that? But here we are.
Yeah, when we recorded Hoosier Network College Football today, our good friend Jet Garrett said, who would have thought that the first game of the 12-team college football playoff would be featuring the Indiana Hoosiers? But here we are, and it is a blessing that we get to watch this game as students.
And so, Ryan, when you look at Notre Dame, you look at IU, we said it's a fair matchup. We said those teams are similar. Who do you have winning going against the Georgia Bulldogs?
So this is interesting. I think that, what Nick just said, he said 20-19, and I'm kind of on that track as well. I think if Indiana scores more than, let's say, 30 points, I think this will be a blowout victory for Indiana. But I don't see that happening. I see Notre Dame, this game is going to be won with the run. I said this earlier on the podcast. The defensive secondary for Indiana and the defensive secondary for Notre Dame are going to play vital roles, whether it's with the Notre Dame tight ends or the Indiana receivers. The one constant for both teams is running the ball. Two really good offensive lines. I think both backs for both teams are going to be featured a lot, whether it's Tyson Lawton and Ellison, whether it's Price and Jeremiah Love. I just think that this is going to be, this is going to be a Big Ten style game, even though Notre Dame, they're not in the Big Ten, but they like to play this style of game with the run, with the tight ends involved, and you're going to get a lot of Riley Leonard in this game. A lot of, quarterback runs, design runs, keepers, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, I want to go with the experience. I want to go with, a quarterback that is multi-dimensional. And I'm going to go with the better running backs, and that is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I like the score to be, let's see, I mentioned Indiana will have a chance to win the game with a touchdown after they go and score a touchdown and get a 2-point conversion. So I'll say 24-18. Notre Dame takes it. I would not be shocked if Indiana wins.
Okay.
But right now, 10 days removed, maybe we'll get a little bit more amped up. But right now, I think Notre Dame wins.
Okay, that's fair. I think it's interesting because now everyone has said IU, besides you, Ryan. But it's okay. We'll give you the pass because you're usually always on it. So maybe Notre Dame, but Pat McAfee would always say, "Give me the Hoosiers." The Hoosiers are coming out with the win. I'm going to say at first round of the college football playoffs, I have the Hoosiers 21-17 beating the Fighting Irish, and I stand by it. But we will see this weekend. It all comes down. The bracket's going to break down. Everyone's going to take some losses. Everyone's going to take some wins, and it's going to be fun. And we'll be back to even talk about it too.
Will we though? Will we be back? I think
I think we have to be back.
This might be our last episode, barring Indiana making the national championship.
I mean, maybe.
This could be our last episode, and for that, I will say we need to thank the people that make this show possible.
Okay, go ahead.
The directors at HN, Ari, Austin, Audrey, and Colin, producer Colin, in the back. You can't see him. He's putting up a hand up there.
We love Colin.
We want to thank everybody that's been on the show with us this season. It's been a great ride. I want to thank you, partner. It's been
thank you.
It's been fantastic. And what a way to finish off this season with a college football playoff game.
We love it, and we honor it, and we love being Hoosiers, and we love Hoosier Game Day. And so with that, we appreciate you guys, and Hoosier Game Day, Ryan and Liv.